we're going to talk about the sovereignty of God. And it's an interesting topic to talk about. And what is sovereignty of God? I so much appreciate Sandy sharing about a personal experience of how, because watch this, a true understanding that God is in control changes your life. Changes your life. If you believe you're in control, let me just tell you, you have a huge job. When you either quit that job or get fired, because how many are thankful sometimes God's firing you from being in control? Life gets a whole lot different. And so when you understand the sovereignty of God, within the sovereignty, and the sovereignty is control, is, if God is, I'm not sovereign, I don't even want to go there. If a king is sovereign, they have power, they have authority, they have control. Well, Jesus is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and the creator of the universe. So he has power, authority, and control. Sometimes when we hear the word sovereignty, we get afraid of it because we think then, therefore, we are a slave. Well, that's not what we're talking about with Jesus, and we're going to get into that today. But the one thing I want you to hear, and I so appreciate Sandy talking about this, is understanding of sovereignty brings you freedom. Total freedom. The ultimate freedom is when you realize he's in control and you're not. So freeing when you do that. So we're going to talk a little bit about King Jesus, things like that. So, but I've in this series that we're going through, I only got one more week of this, and then what it's going to do, because we are going into like a worship workshop, so to say, or worship conferences each day, because an understanding of who God is must drive us to worship. It has to. The more we understand about who God is, the character of God, the properties of God, it just, all of them should go, wow. So if we're not going, wow, we might not be gaining an understanding of our God. If we're going, something's a disconnect. An understanding of him will bring us to the wow, and so that's why we're following up with the worship conference. So, and I so much appreciate each one of you. A lot of you are getting out to things like the marriage thing yesterday, and like our Wednesday night. This is our last Wednesday night. Thank you for coming out, because we're getting at foundational things. Because here's it. I said for 9 months, get ready for May 1st. Well, when you start saying things like that, May's a good month too. I have like these fact checkers in the house. Thank you for being there. You don't realize what it's like to just talk all the time and try to say the same thing you say multiple. March 1st, I've been saying for a long time, get ready for March 1st. Well, March 1st is like, 10, 12, maybe 14 days away. And so it's coming. And so be prepared for it. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing heavy Wednesday night teachings and workshops. Because we want us to be ready. We want us to be ready. We're doing a regroup. Why? Because it's, hey, time out. Come here. We got to get ready. And then there's a release after the timeout and a release into the timeout. So we're being released, and the Spirit of God is being released in a very dynamic way. They can't they can't be apart. They're all completely hand in hand. But as we do this, I just want us to have our heart so prepared for what God wants to teach us and all those around. Even this Tuesday, we're doing I don't know what it is, a mini teaching on loving young people, loving teenagers, kind of designed for people who are going to work with teenagers and minister to them, but it's not a bad gig for somebody who's raising teenagers to come to. If you're struggling loving your teenager, come on out. I'm going to give you principles, and I'm telling you, they're good principles. Principles are true, then you got to work it out with Jesus. So just because you get a principle doesn't mean, I know this is working out with Jesus. So Tuesday night, come on out to that. But in this, one other thing I heard, I was in the bathroom, I heard the announcements. It said there was a lunch today. There's not. So somehow that got bumped in there. Don't go standing in line for lunch. You might wait till Wednesday before food will be served out there. So this whole idea of the sovereignty of God, I know God wants to deposit it on us. So Jesus, teach us what it is that you are sovereign. Teach us. We've talked about different characteristics. I talked about don't subscribe to the salad bar view of God. It's very important because our culture right now loves the buffet view of God. You go through a buffet. I like this. That looks awful. That looks just for like old people who have health problems. This looks great. That looks like just a kid's meal. Okay, so we go through a salad bar or a buffet style of view of God. Well, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to do that. These are the things that we are touching on. There's so many more things. You cannot exhaust who God is, because once you have arrived, you realize you've arrived at an inner state. And there's so much more. So we've talked about we need to understand that this buffet is the goodness of God. Everybody wants a big dose of that. And the love of God, oh, it's awesome. There's the faithfulness of God, the wisdom of God, the sovereignty of God, the justice of God. Some like to skip that. The holiness of God. I don't even know what that is. I don't want to try it. Or whatever it would be, but it's all of them, because all of them make him who he is. We're going to have fun next week. I'm going to just go for it. I'm going to talk about next week. I'm going to talk about sin, and I'm going to talk about what is sin in 2020 in America. That ought to be fun. My goal is to offend everybody. I don't know where. So I am going to do that, because I think it's really an important topic, because we must understand it. Because some sin is always a sin, no matter what. Some sin is a cultural sin. So what is that? Some of you are doing things today that if you had done them in 1962, you'd be going to hell. Yeah. I saw some of you dancing. So we're going to have fun with that next week. We're going to have fun with it, but it's really serious stuff, because we better get a hold of it, because we're in a world that has no idea what sin is. I just don't want us to pick and choose. So anyway, so here I want to show you this demonstration, because it's such an important thing. We get it all. Let's say that you're out, well, let's do this, because we're in the middle of, some of you are ending a sports season or whatever. Okay, you're out there and you're playing a game, you're in a basketball game, you come to the huddle, and you go, right? What if somebody throws you a bottle of water? I gotta have some water. All right, so here you go. Boom. You got your bottle of water. You're excited. You start to chug it. So you pour this in here. You're like, yeah, my bottle of water, all that stuff. And you're refreshed, right? Well, you know this is H2O, right? Okay, then you start to think about this water. H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. That doesn't seem fair. Does this seem fair? 2 hydrogen? Only 1 oxygen? So you start to do a campaign promoting oxygen. Get another oxygen. Get equality for oxygen. Oxygen is being left out of this huddle. So you put a second oxygen. So you get H2O2. You're like, yes, we have arrived. We're now fair, because we don't care anything about who God is. We just think it seems better based on nothing scientific. So what you do with H2O2 is you produce this, hydrogen peroxide. Like, this is awesome. Equal parts. Yes. We got that going on there. And we're so excited. Show me that picture of that cat. 2 men walk into a bar. The first orders some H2O. The second one says, sounds good, I'll have some H2O too. The second man died. Our ideas aren't necessarily good unless they're based on truth. We could have even fun with another thing. Let's say you just don't like oxygen. Who likes oxygen? Let's just get rid of that. Let's just do H2, because I like an H. It's strong and firm. What happens if we just do H2? Fire up that thing. So this is just straight H2. Now, none of you are around here, but this thing was called the Hindenburg. So it seems good, right? H2's awesome. We're singing songs about H2. And, oh my goodness, something went awry. Don't drink H2 when you're thirsty. Spoiler alert, it went down. Here's the crazy thing about this. There was like 96 people on board. 64 of them survived. Is that not weird? Yeah, I don't. You guys can go study the Hindenburg if you want, but it's a weird. Anyways, though, my point is, let's not pick and choose who God is. If he says who he is, like he says H2O is pretty good to drink, H2O2 is not, and H2 is not, let's pay attention to him. So today, as we go into the sovereignty of God, I want us to pay attention to this. I want us to pay attention to who he is. It's not our ideas. If I were to just teach traits about God that I liked, it wouldn't be true. Actually, that's not true at all, because I honestly like every trait of God. I do. But you have to get to that point. So when we talk about the sovereignty of God, when I say he's in charge, and Sandy did a nice job of going to Colossians 1 and talk about he was before all things, created all things. But let me just fire. These are the truths that we're saying. Watch this. When we say God is sovereign, therefore he is before all things. These are all out of scriptures. He created all things. He upholds all things. He's above all things. He knows better than Google, right? He can do, he accomplishes, and he's in control of all things. I'm telling you, that's a sovereign God. And here, watch what happens. We can say those because we're in a teaching right now, and we know they're all in the Bible, and like check, 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 check. Okay, you get to a life situation, suddenly one of those is no longer true, right? We know that. I mean, you can just say that. God was in control. God is in control of most things, just not this thing. God can do almost all things, but he probably can't handle this thing, right? That's how our view of sovereignty. It's kind of a sliding scale of sovereignty. Listen, either you're sovereign or he's not. You're welcome to choose he's not sovereign. And I said this. It is either a bunch of something. I'm impressed I remembered that first part. It is either a bunch of random events happening for no reason, or God's in control. It's really your two choices. And it's okay to choose either one of those choices. You're free to do that. I'm just going to tell you that there's consequences of both choices. So it's either a bunch of random events happening for no reason, or God's in control. What's the next one? Say. Okay, here's me. You can call me naive, foolish, and unrealistic. That's totally fine. I've been called a lot of things in my life. Whatever. You don't understand things. You got a utopian view of life. You have, you're unrealistic. You're too happy. You're too positive. Whatever. You can call me all those things. But let me tell you, believing in a sovereign God is not only true, it is also a far superior way to live. It's the practical side. It's a superior way to live. And listen, I stake my whole life on that. Believing in a God who's in control is a better way to live. We're afraid to say that at times, right? We're afraid to say, it always sounds bad when you say this, but my life is better than most people's. It is. And yours should be better than most too. I'm telling you, if people don't know God the Father, if they've never come to Jesus Christ, if they don't know who he is, there's no way they can live the abundant life that I can live. And so believing in the characteristics of God, they not only are true, my life is better because of it. It's a bold statement, but it's a true statement. It just is. And I'll talk to some people, and maybe they'll say, Rick, you got this going on, and I like it. And they say, what do you do? It's easy to say, oh, well, I'm not that good, da-da-da-da-da-da. Listen, don't get that. Just point to the truth. My life is better because I know Jesus. Period. Just is. They might have so many more toys than me, but they don't have the peace I have. They might have everything the world has to offer, but they don't have what the next world has to offer. Amen. And so there's something amazing about understanding the fullness of who our God is. So as you go through life then, because there are questions that come about when you say the sovereignty of God. One question definitely that comes about when you talk about God is in control, you will always get the question, well, what about bad things happening? It's a good question, right? I promise you, I will not give you the be-all answer today, nor ever. It's a good question. I've settled some things in my mind about sin. First of all, we do bad things. we are, watch this. Have you ever had a stuffed animal that was a puppy? Nobody? Thank you. Me and Mary have, and Sandy. They're kind of cool. They'll cuddle with you. They'll sit on your lap. They'll hang out with you. They'll do anything you make it do. You ever had a real dog that actually came to you and liked you? There's a little difference. However, that real dog causes real problems. But the only way you can receive love is if they are capable of causing real problems. There's something about the way God made us, the way that we love him, that fires him up. There's a lot. I mean, he says the rocks worship him, right? Rocks, I don't think he gets all charged up when a rock cries out. Maybe if they started crying out. But I don't think he says, wow, look at those rocks. Come on, Jesus, let's dance around. No, he's like, oh, there's a rock doing what a rock could do. But when he sees one of his kids who has a choice to go that way, comes this way and says, God, you're awesome. Gets charged up. And we're in a world that's fallen and is a mess. This is not our home. If you're trying to make this your home, you will get tripped up by the fact that bad things happen. But if you understand this is not my home, I don't know, I might be here 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, I don't know, 90 years, 100, whatever. I'm here for a short time. And then I go to my eternal home. So I can get through junk. I can get through pain. You know, the longer you live, the more you understand pain. What happens? I mean, you get up and you're like, ow, what's going on? Well, it's part of this world we're in. But this is not my permanent world, and so I get a different view of things going on. So when you get to this, when I don't understand, and there's plenty we don't understand, remember, I've said this so many times, but the moment you fully understand your God is the moment he ceases to be your God. Period. And you say, well, that is like a cop-out. It does sound like a cop-out, but it's also true. Just as true. It has to be true. If it's not true, I wasn't created. And if I wasn't created, we got a whole heap of other problems. I can't fully understand. So therefore, when I don't understand, God still wants me to struggle with finding the answers, but he's not looking us to find the test question answer. He is the answer. And so as we pursue into him, dive into him more, we will actually stop asking that same question because we've found an answer that produces another question. And as long as we keep pursuing in him, we will keep becoming more like him. So when you don't understand things, make sure your default is trust. I'm going to trust, and I'll get there. I'm going to trust, and I'll get there. When it all seems bad, I know that this has never happened to anybody, but has anybody ever gone through a bad thing? You're like, everything's, there's the Midas touch, right? And then there's like I don't know, is it the Monroe touch? I don't know. It's like the opposite of the Midas touch. You go through a season where everything you touch seems to go bad. What's happened? Every relationship is failing. Every financial thing is going awry. Every business deal. But it's like, man, I just want to check out. It's all going bad. And you were all going to let me drink this. Were you going to yell? Oh, well, you didn't freak out enough to stop me, but thanks for thinking about stuff. Actually, I don't think this will hurt me that much. It's so diluted. Was this the right one? Okay. I think it'll bubble out, doesn't it? I think hydrogen peroxide actually forms bubbles in you. See, now I don't even know what I was saying. Yeah, just try it. Can I get a volunteer from the crowd? So let me jump into a couple places in Scripture because that always helps me. So I want to go to a couple places where we begin to question how this all works. I do want to mention, though, because when you talk about sovereignty, you have to understand this. It's easy to go from sovereignty to fatalism. They're sisters. They're complete opposite, but they're sisters. What is fatalism? So you got to understand that, because a lot of times people will view God being in charge as what fatalism becomes. Fatalism, the easiest way to see fatalism is to go to a culture that has about 4,000 to 5,000 years of fatalism in it. And it's a Hindu culture. I'll just say it here. There are some religions that are worse than other religions. Period. This isn't even, I don't care what you think about that. If you think all religions are equal, you really are ignorant. They're not all equal. Some are bad. Some are bad worldviews, bad philosophies, whatever you want to say. Hinduism is traditionally, it's changing now because of Western influence and things like that. So don't quite, and any Hindus that are in America aren't quite Hindu anymore of that culture. But if you've been to India, especially been in rural India, you have seen fatalism at work. And it has an ugly face. Fatalism says, I was born like that. Therefore, I will stay like that. Anything bad that happens to me was supposed to happen. Anything good that happens was supposed to happen. I have no control. I have no say. Therefore, if there's a mess on the floor, there's no need to clean it up, because if I get sick from that, well, it was supposed to be. And if I live in a lousy house that has, snakes coming through the walls because we have holes in them, well, that's just the way it is, and so we're going to deal with that. And it's I've spent a lot of time in India, and I look at it, and I think, oh, this worldview is so wrong. Sovereignty of God is not fatalism. Not at all. It's not even close to fatalism. Let me show you how the mystery is God's in control and we're in play. It's a mystery. How in the world does the sovereign God of the universe still keep us involved? Not only just like we do something every once in a while that helps him. I mean, we are actually involved. Best picture of this, I think, in the Bible is Queen Esther. Queen Esther was a Jewish girl. You need to read the book of Esther. It's a crazy book. It's an amazing book. She ended up winning a beauty contest and becoming queen of Persia. Funny thing about a beauty contest is it just happened this past week, and so I have to share it with you. We through J. Paul, the International Sports Academy in India. So this is you guys. He finds kids who don't have anything going on, and pulls them kind of out of whatever they're in, gets them a coach and trains them how to be badminton. So they're really good. We actually have had like 3 or 4 state champions come through us. And so this one girl who was a state champion in volleyball, she's really pretty. And so she got noticed by some people at this badminton, I don't know why I said volleyball, badminton tournament that they were at. Anyways, though, kind of got hooked up with this, I guess it's called a beauty pageant. That's probably a word that if I say, I'll get in trouble. So for lack of a better word, that. She went on to win. This is so funny. She went on to win the equivalent of Miss Pennsylvania. Is that not weird? I don't even know how to wrap my head around that. We're doing work with human trafficking and kids, and now we got Miss Pennsylvania type in India. Here's the crazy thing. She actually now is in all these high-end places. Now she's in a very powerful place for women in the state of whatever it's Andhra Pradesh. It's the state that's around there. But so now she's like the top girl in this state. It's a funny thing. So why did I get on it? Oh, because Queen Esther won a beauty contest. So at least it has some biblical principle to it. So I have no idea what's going to happen to this girl, but, pray. It's a weird thing, and it's an odd thing, so we may be heading to, it's actually Miss Asia. She's going into next, Miss Asia International, something like that. It's actually in the Philippines, the contest is, so how about that? Maybe I'll be coming over to go over there. But Queen Esther, thank you. So she wins this, all this stuff. In the middle of this, you know the story. If you don't know the story, please read the story of Esther in the Bible. There's a plot to kill all Jews in the world, basically. And Queen Esther is a Jew. She's the queen. She's in a very unique position. And so her uncle goes to her and says to her, hey, Esther, maybe you could do something about the Jews being killed, right? It's not a bad giddy up to do. And he says to her in verse 14 of chapter 4 of Esther, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will rise from another place. Watch this. Will God protect the Jews? 100%. You can't kill them. How do I know that? Because for 4,000 years, the entire world has tried to kill all the Jews. You can't do it. Why? Because God's sovereign. He's sovereign. You're not going to do it. Every generation has a new plan. Not only do they not kill them, somehow the Jews keep rising up to rule. I mean, the fact that a Jew is breathing today is one of the greatest proofs that the Word of God is real. And then the fact that they actually are some of the most influential people in the history of the world is like truly the icing on the cake. But the sovereignty of God will protect the Jewish people. Period. I don't give a rip about your opinion. God will protect the Jewish people. Oh, it's his sovereignty. Watch what he says. Watch what he says to Esther. If you don't protect them, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. See how he ties these two things together? Esther, you're in the perfect place. I got you there. Let's do this. Come on. Let's come together. We're going to see victory. We got this going on. All that stuff. And if Esther says, you know what? Not for me. Boom, there she goes. And God says, okay, you. Come on, here we go. God always has plan B. I think, and I know this sounds really goofy, but where God has to be called right now, I actually think, and I can identify them, I think I'm the seventh choice for this. At least it's a good number. I really do. I believe I can point to this person had this chance, this person did, da, 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 da. I think I'm choice number 7. Now, one thing that does is it keeps me humble because 6 people checked out. But it also makes me, I don't want to check out. I don't want God to take the 8th. I want the 8th to do their call, which isn't my call. And so I want us to get a hold of that. God is not dependent on you. You mentioned, Sandy, we all try to do this. We try to do something to control God, right? The classic, the 2-year-old, I'll hold my breath until I get my... Go ahead. It ain't going to work. Okay? And that's how we try to manipulate God. It's silly to try to manipulate God like that because it doesn't work. If you refuse to join him in his plan, he doesn't say, what did you say? He never gets surprised, nervous, anxious. I heard somebody say we oftentimes say, it just occurred to me. Do you realize God never says that? Nothing just occurs to God. He's fine. But he says, come on in. Come on in. For such a time as this, he's called you. And then I don't know why. The clock must run faster in this service. But let me just say the last part of this is when bad things do happen, and they do. If somebody's preaching you a gospel that bad things don't happen, they're not preaching the gospel of the Bible. Bad things happen. But he's overcome the world, and we've joined him and overcome the world. Therefore, we can overcome the bad things. And we can change our perspective on them by knowing the sovereignty of God. And I'll just tell you this story because it's so good, but you know it. Joseph in Genesis chapter 50, remember, he was the one that God promised. He promised him, you're going to rule. That was the dream. That was the promise at 17 years old. And for the next 13 years, everything happened except he would be in some sort of position. He had 13 years of every break went against him. He was only 30. And he had 13 bad years. That's a lot of bad years. Then finally, miraculously, God turned it for good. Became prime minister of Egypt. Then another 10 and a half years before he finally saw his call come to fruition. Then years later, after Dad had died, and Joseph was still in power, and his brothers came around him, and they said, this is scary because we're pretty sure Joseph's going to kill us. Because why not? But then he says the greatest statement at the end here, and it's Genesis 50 and 20. Genesis 50 and 20 says, he says to his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. You see, Joseph looked back at those 13 years and say, yeah, everything in this world went wrong, and everybody was against me. But I believe if he was teaching today, he says, but I believed in a sovereign God. I believed in a God that had a bigger picture than my personal comfort. And he worked it all to good. You know what? That's directed at 11 brothers, or I guess 10 brothers. But we make it what the enemy meant for harm, God turned it for good. And so those two things in your life, the Esther question, am I really involved? Or the Joseph question, why is everything going bad? I'm telling you, trust in a sovereign God. Is there pain along the way? Sure. I'm telling you, there's going to be some time. Let's just go 1,000 years down the road. You're really not going to care about that cold you had last week. So you're going to get through it. Because you're going to see that our God is in control. He's in control. I know there's pain. Come on, we all feel it. Some is deep. Some is deep. Some are struggles. They're real. But what the enemy intended to harm you, our sovereign God intended for good. I am so thankful, Sandra, that you gave that testimony today. But those were not fun years. But looking back, you say, God's sovereign. He's good. He's full of love. He's brought me freedom, and he's going to bring it to you. It's awesome. It's also why we can love people in their struggle, right? Next week, we're going to talk about sin. I have no problem embracing people who are caught in the middle of a struggle. Why? Because I believe in a sovereign God. And I believe in a God who brings people out, and it's on his timeline. It might be a year, might be 20 years, might be 50. We just had a guy this week, 86 years old. His whole life had hated God. He accepted Jesus, right, Mickey? It's awesome. On his deathbed. It's awesome. I have no problem loving him the years when he is an idiot, because I believe in a sovereign God. And it's not my place to make him change today. It ain't going to work. But when you believe in a God who works things together for good, it's so good. I need to stop, but I just want to say these two things that I want you to take home, and then worship team can just give you a few minutes to reflect on this. Here's my takeaway, my personal takeaway from believing in a sovereign God. These sound really brash, but I want to put them out and just let you take them before Jesus. What's my response to believing in a sovereign Lord? 1, I absolutely must refuse to worry. It's a really bold statement. 2, I absolutely choose to worship. Worship and worry are two completely opposite things. If you do one, you can't do the other. If you're full of worry, you can't worship. If you're full of worship, you can't worry. And when you see God for who he is, you can't worry. He takes care of everything. My default is trust. So I got to see him for who he is. I won't worry, I will worship. I probably should have put them the opposite. I will worship, therefore I won't worry. And when you find yourself worrying, start worshiping. Because when you find yourself worshiping, you can't worry. In the Word of God, a few times people caught glimpses of Jesus. None of them were worried about tomorrow's dinner. Actually, they just fell down dead. And then God says, no, come on, get up. Let's just take a minute. I just want you to reflect on that. I want you to catch on this. I take it before God this week. Say, God, I want to understand you, who you are.